Hey everybody, it is Mike Wan, and it is Sunday, December the 3rd, calendar year 2023. Yesterday was my birthday. I turned 52. I remember very clearly where I was on my birthday, my previous birthday, and how much my life has changed, specifically my lifestyle in this past cycle. And if last year was any sort of precedent as to the new rhythm, at least within my life, I know that the up and coming year has a lot of unexpected new ways of life to show itself. And so I guess I want to begin this video with maybe like an update. If I look at the statistics as it relates to the views of my videos on YouTube, like it doesn't really change. So if the people who watch this are people who watch me regularly, so it's not like there's a lot of new energy which is coming into this. So you guys have been my friends for a while, so I'll bring you some updates. I think it's been a while since I've recorded a video. The last time I recorded a video, I was still in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I was house sitting at my sister's place. And since then, there had been numerous additional house sitting opportunities on the west coast of Florida, 2 in Sarasota, and now I find myself on the east coast of Florida, outside of West Palm Beach. And what I'm witnessing, and really what the previous year was for me, was this really breaking out of a lifestyle that I understood myself in living, and moving into a very kind of like nomadic lifestyle. Like quite literally, I don't have a permanent address. And probably a year ago, maybe even more than that, that would have been a very uncomfortable concept. But as life has unfolded and has brought me into this path, that idea does not have the same discomfort as it once did. Now, the second thing which is really coming into fruition is like, what am I doing? What am I doing during this travel? Like, I'm not just like traveling around. What I call natural astrology, which might also be called non-dualistic astrology, is becoming more and more prevalent in my experience, and it's what I'm sharing. It's like what I'm doing. Like it's dovetailing. Like I'm quite literally becoming this nomadic astrologer, natural astrologer. And what natural astrology is, and really like everything which I've talked about online over the past, it's probably been about 5-6 years now that I've been doing this, which has been a lot of synchromystic storytelling. They all of this weaves together, it integrates, it dovetails. And this coming year, this past year seems to be, every year is like a step. I'm experiencing it as a step. I guess this is true for all of us, but this has been really intense for me, has been a step into a new expression in so many different ways. And so last year was really about becoming mobile and disconnecting from this idea of having like a permanent address. And this coming year is linking into this idea of being a nomadic natural astrologer, because it is through the practice of natural astrology that I'm finding the stability to move around, particularly in this time of major transition of paradigm reality or life on Earth. So Where am I going? So let me give you an update. That's what this is all about. And those of you who are interested, so I turned 52, for those who keep score. My good friend Danny Katz, rightfully so, does not, she sees the limitation. She sees the real limitation of keeping score of one's birth age or what have you. I think 52 is interesting because 52 is a factor. 52 years is a factor of 52 weeks if you want to go by that system, and so it's kind of interesting. But where was I going? Okay, this video. So there's an update, and the update is primarily this, like me moving more and more into these stories, which I'm doing are teachings or demonstrations of natural astrology and why natural astrology is important right now. So next week, today is the 3rd, so on the 8th of December, I'm going to be going back on the podcast circuit. There was a point in time where I was probably a guest on a podcast, a different podcast, once every 2 weeks. And that has really slowed down since since February 2022, when I moved out of the house I was living in Millersville, and began this kind of nomadic sort of existence. I've been making videos like this, but as I said, like not many people watch it besides the people who are, maybe vested into listening to the story, watching the story of my life unfold. But I'm going to go back on the 8th. I'm going to begin a process of establishing my what I bring to the equation. We all bring something to the equation. So what I bring to the equation and showing it on a larger platform. So on the 8th, I'm going to go on the higher side chats. I haven't been there for a while. I think it'll be my 6th appearance, and I know a lot of my viewers were introduced to me that way. And in this presentation, in this interview, which I'll be doing with Greg, I will be telling the story. I'll be telling the story of really Corona and this time period of Corona, the coronation, and how life has changed and where we find ourselves, and particularly for those of us who are not interested in going the direction which is being laid out before us, primarily through technology, and not having like an alternative. Like how do you know where and what to write the course during this very interesting time period? And so that's where natural astrology comes in. Like the natural astrology is a practice. It's a practice of aligning your consciousness with the circadian rhythms of the heavens for the purpose of being able to move throughout life, when particularly now that all of the ways which we were conditioned and indoctrinated to navigate life, like that really doesn't hold true anymore. So how do you move through? So that's kind of the practice of natural astrology. I'll be talking about that on Greg's show, and I've got a couple of other shows already lined up, like big platforms, where I'm going to begin to tell this story again, and I'm excited. I'll be telling the story of really my experience, and I'll be doing that as a demonstration of what it looks like to really move off of the planned path, your own planned path. And the reason I do that is because, we're all in this together, and I'm not suggesting that everyone follow my direction per se, but when you hear people, and a lot of the folks who I do one-on-one sessions with, like at the end of the day, it's just like they want to have a sympathetic ear saying like, I don't know the direction I'm going. And I want to talk to someone who knows what it's like to kind of like step into the unknown. And that's the collective thing. We're all going to be stepping into the unknown. That's the reason why what's laid out before us is so tempting, because there's the unknown. All of the previous opportunities, all the previous ways of life are slowly disappearing, and that's very unsettling. And that's why what's being laid out before you is even more appealing. Like, oh yeah, I'll go do the blockchain sort of thing, because there aren't any other options. And so it takes courage to go and step into the unknown outside of familiarity. And that is a personal story, but we can find inspiration from others. And so, one, I share my story for that reason. And two, like, I think natural astrology, as I practice it and teach it, is a means in which people can have an individual relationship with that which moves the currents of life, which includes life within paradigm. Like, if you are connected with the currents, with the rhythms outside of paradigm rhythms, well, then you can move in and out of paradigm and you're not quite as effective. That's what all of this stuff is about. So, okay, where am I? 10 minutes in. What am I going to talk about today? What I'm going to be talking about a lot going forward, which is like natural astrology. I'm going to do my first class. It's beginning on December 12th. It's going to be 5 weeks, and I'm going to be going through natural astrology. And this is learning the practice of it. I've got a couple spots left. If you're interested, sign up. Send me an email. You could go to Linktree. That's the only thing I'm doing right now. I still have to have like some degree of an online footprint, so that's it. But a couple spots left. And then going forward, what I'm envisioning is like regular sessions, like open to the public. You don't have to be in this 5-week class, which I'm going to be teaching. But it's going to be about the practice of natural astrology. And it's appropriate for, people who have a lot of understanding of cultural astrology and people who have very little. Anyway, so I'm talking natural astrology. And today, the things I want to talk about are 3 things. I'm going to talk about what I wrote down is the foundations of natural astrology. So some basic assumptions which are built into natural astrology. And then after that, I'm going to just talk a little bit about astro charts and the age of Aquarius. I gotta readjust. You get to become 52 years old, sitting in the same position for a while can be a little bit difficult on your knees. All right. Notebooking is a really big part of natural astrology as well. Creating a record of your life and moving outside of like the notebook computer and returning back to notebooks. I've talked a lot about. I've shown videos in the past of the different notebooks which I've made. And so I started a new one just in alignment with my birthday. And that's really kind of fun for me. Like, these are markers. That's all this stuff is. It's markers. These are markers of the unfolding of life. That's it. And you're finding this balance between being present in the moment, but not lost in the moment. Like, you're lost in the moment when, you're completely, I guess being in flow state is lost in the moment, but the shadow side of being lost in the moment is you don't know where you are. Like, you don't have a point of reference of the unfolding of life. Likewise, when you're so focused on just like, where I'm going and mapping it all out, you lose the spontaneity and the joy of being in the moment. So that's part of what this practice is. And so notebooks as well. So let me begin with this. Natural Astrology Foundation. So one of the things, I keep on saying I'm going to start it, but I like to get distracted, because there are things I want to share. I'm down here on the east coast of Florida, and I did an event in this kava bar in West Palm Beach. My good friend Liz Cat set it up. And how it was originally presented was that it was going to be like a little bit of a workshop presentation on what is natural astrology, but it didn't unfold like that. So these are the notes which I wrote for what I thought I was going to be talking about at that event, but I didn't use it, so I'm using them here now. So I wrote down 6 different things. So the first one, natural astrology foundations. So we begin with the life experience is a mystery, and so these are foundations which are kind of built into the practice of natural astrology. So which is the life experience, being alive, this thing which you're doing, which I'm doing, and so forth, is a mystery, and we're immersed within it. And this mystery is not meant to be figured out. We can't necessarily figure this out, this mystery. So a lot of like cultural astrology is for figuring things out. Like, I'm going to figure this out. What's going on? And there's all of these different stories also about how like astrology came into existence. In natural astrology, you're not trying to do that. You're just, you recognize this is a mystery, and it is the seeing that the heavens are a tool to the experience of being alive. Okay. Number 2, separateness, or the inner world. So like what you feel and think inside, your internal experience, as separate from the outer world. So that's what I mean by separateness. So like the outer world and the inner world as being 2 distinctly separate things. That idea of separateness, that is an illusion. So this is built into to practice natural astrology like that. This what I'm saying right now is a foundation of which is required in order to really practice natural astrology, which is like separateness is an illusion. The inner world and the outer world, they're one and the same. They're mysteriously connected. Like, I'm not saying, like, I don't know, like, I'm not explaining how they're connected. They just are. And that's what so much of the synchromistic storytelling is, particularly as it related to my own journeys, is like, how could this be? How is this, like, the stuff I talk about, the stuff I'm interested in, show itself so obviously in the outer world? And again, I'm not unique. I might be unique in the fact that I'm sharing the story, or how I share the story, but what I'm describing is the nature of how the realm works, which is this mysterious connection between the outer world and the inner world. Well, the connection is the fact that it's one and the same. This is also could be described as non-dualism. Most non-dualism may use like kind of different words or are grounded in different sort of specifics as it relates to like a philosophy. Like non-dualism is found in a lot of the ancient Eastern philosophies, but really all the ancient philosophies, recognizing like there's just one life. There's, this is a mystical approach. The mystic's approach is non-dualism, that what you're experiencing, you are not separate from it. Your inner world is not separate from it. Your thoughts, your emotions, all the people, we're all integrated. We're all part of one whole. So practicing natural astrology is a recognition, like that's part of how this experience works, and this experience is a mystery. We're not trying to solve the mystery, we're trying to live it, I suppose. And so the third thing with natural astrology is the recognition that the heavens is the unifying factor. Yeah, the heavens are the unifying factor. I mean, this is, if you're paying attention, what are you paying attention to? To life. If you're paying attention, like the heavens are very obvious, the unifying factor. Wherever you are, like physically, on earth, there are probably attributes of that region, whether that be like mountains or the ocean or the plains or the weather, like there's something which is unique to where you are. And theoretically, like every human being on Earth, whatever the hell Earth may be, doesn't have access to all of these different things. Like, not everyone gets to climb the same mountain, or even see the same mountain, or swim in the same ocean, or what have you. I mean, theoretically, I guess you could go and see them all, but practically speaking, that doesn't happen. And then people could also, like, through paradigm, it could be like, this is off limits, this is private property, and like if you go and you step on this land, like we have legal authority to arrest you, and all these different things like that all happens, and that's part of this time, this paradigm. But heavens, the moon, everyone gets to look at. I'm assuming we're all looking at the same moon. I'm assuming you're not blind, or I'm assuming, the sky is not covered in something, but like at least in greater theory that the heavens, the sun, the moon, all of the stars, like it doesn't matter where you are on Earth, you get to see it. This is the unifying factor. Like every human being that's ever been alive, like, again, these caveats have to do with the fact that I recognize that everything is in question. I'm assuming we're all looking at the same moon. All the people before us, assuming there were people before us, they're looking at the same moon. And so it's a unified factor. And that's part of natural astrology, recognizing that is the place of the heavens. So now the fourth point is, due to the inner world, outer world connection, and the fact that this is a consciousness-driven experience. Like this experience that we're all having is ultimately driven by consciousness, by what you're paying attention to, how you interpret it, what you're not paying attention to, like everything which is happening in that kind of mind space, consciousness space. This is what drives our experience. So due to the fact that we know this is true, and we talked about like this inner world, outer world relationship, which is consciousness driven as well. This realm, this experience, this thing that we're having, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. That is part of one, understanding natural astrology, how we practice, why we practice, but it's also just like an awareness of, just reality here. That's part of the non-dualistic. It's like what you're thinking, what you are anticipating, seeing, what you've been indoctrinated to how to see the world. That's part of your inner world. That's part of your consciousness. And when you are moving about and paying attention to the outer world, that connection between the two, they're going to feed off of one another. Understanding that fact is a very, very big part of the practice of natural astrology, because this is where you're going to really begin to move off of cultural astrology, because the cultural astrology is an indoctrination to have you look at the heavens in a certain way. That's a tough one for a lot of people who have both experienced astrology to be like something of value in their lives, and then also those who have invested the amount of energy in order to learn astrology. Astrology, at least in theory, is like a difficult concept. It really doesn't have to be. But they made it that way. But when you begin to, like, if you're being honest, like the astrology, it breaks down. The cultural astrology, it breaks down. And the reason it works is because so many people have accepted and indoctrinated a certain understanding of what these things mean. And then this self-fulfilling prophecy element comes into play. If you understand the idea of an egregore, that's kind of the same thing. When enough people like feed and believe into something, it comes alive. Is it necessarily organically alive? I don't know. But something happens. Like it has an enlivening quality. And well, let me go into the next point, and because it kind of links in. And I'll go into this alivening quality. So the next point is most cultural astrology and the zodiac, and the interpretations are just anchors of meaning, and these anchors of meaning are linked to the heavens. This is part of the natural astrology process is recognizing this truth and deconstructing cultural astrology. Again, that doesn't mean that cultural astrology can't be accurate, nor does it mean that cultural astrology can't be of value. It's only a disservice when one doesn't necessarily recognize the truth. And if you're following cultural astrology is a dualistic an approach. Like I said before, that natural astrology is non-dualistic. It's a recognition that like the individual and the whole are, they're one and the same. Like if anything, the individual is a fractal of the whole. Most cultural astrology, through their focused on like interpretations, is really like focusing upon understanding reality from an identification of your experiences and your learned personality, tied in with a name. Cat's out of the bag. Like, your name ain't real. Yes, your experiences happen. Yes, you have a personality. Yes, you have all this sort of stuff, but that's not really real. Like, those are just points of reference. We can think they're real. Cultural astrology really encourages living life from that. Natural astrology is like, well, let's take a step away from that and realize that there's something even greater going on and more empowering and more joyful. So the reason why natural or cultural astrology works is because our realm, as I said before, is a self-fulfilling prophecy realm. And our realm can be programmed in order to become self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what a trigger is. That's what anchoring is, if like hypnosis talks, where you tie in a meaning or an emotion to something which has no connection to it, but it becomes real. That's what when someone is triggered, an event occurs, whatever their triggering event is, a word, a sound, an image, and then there is an emotional response, an emotional, psychological, physiological response. That's real. That's really happening. When that occurs because of a trigger, that connection isn't real, but it is a real response. If you are able to understand that difference, if you could see like, oh wow, triggers are real things, but they're not authentically true. That's the same thing with cultural astrology. Cultural astrology, whatever practice, you're subscribing to, Western, Sidereal, Vedic, 12-sign, 13-sign, real astrology, all of these meanings are tied into the unifying factor of the heavens. And over time, they become real. But they're not really. They're not. Like, there's a mystery out there, and there's an importance to knowing the heavens. But what we've been convinced isn't necessarily what we've been convinced to and indoctrinated to understand. That is not a fundamental truth. It is just an anchored truth. The practice of natural astrology, and you could do both. You can practice natural astrology and you could still play around with cultural astrology. I do that. But the importance is you're not lying to yourself. The importance is you understand the truth. The importance is when you go and you look at right now, what Jupiter is said to be entropical in the sign of Taurus, but in sidereal placement, it would be in the sign of Aries. And so the truth is, when you see Jupiter in the sky, whether you want to call that Aries or whether you want to call that Taurus, it doesn't matter so much as you realize what you're looking at. Those distinctions are where natural astrology is grounded. And the reason why this is important, when you're beginning to understand the movements and the orbits and get your bearings in the heavens outside of cultural definition, you are linking your inner world consciousness with the outer world, but without the flavor, without the dressing, the window dressing of culture. You could still understand culture, but you're doing it outside. So what's happening is you're making this link with reality, like reality without interpretation. And that link moves you. And it moves you through culture. It moves you through life. That's what we're trying to do with natural astrology. And how do we do that? It begins with understanding the truth, and then it becomes a practice. And what is a practice? Ceremony. Okay. So what's the last point I have? The last point I have about natural astrology is natural astrology seeks to unify individual consciousness, your inner world, my inner world, all of our inner worlds, to the circadian rhythm. So like the natural rhythm. Circadian rhythms, that usually means, I think, like the sunrise sunset cycle of Earth, but it also, that we experience on Earth. But circadian rhythms also just means the natural rhythms. So I'm using it in that definition. The natural rhythms which were bathed underneath. So that's the natural rhythms of the moon, of looking at the moon from dark moon to full moon and back to dark moon again. Of the movements of all of the visible planets, like, watching Venus going from the evening star to the morning star, understanding what's happening, when Jupiter begins to orbit across the sky, and understanding what you're looking at, but then seeing those movements and how they tie into your own natal chart, and understanding it rationally, but then not limiting it to like a cultural definition, nor like a astronomical definition. Like, this is just a mystery, and I understand these are markers. These are markers that allow me to get my bearings in the unfolding of life while still remaining present. Like, that's what we're trying to do, so that life may carry us. Okay. So where was I? The natural astrology seeks to unify individual consciousness to the circadian rhythms of the heavens without cultural interference of cultural astrology, for the purpose of integrating with life, that's life with a capital L, and not paradigm. Paradigm being matrix culture. All of the things which, if you're not paying attention, these are the lenses which are given to us, so that when we look at reality, we're not looking at reality, we're looking at reality through the lens of culture. So we're not actually looking at reality, we're looking at a tinted reality. All right, so talked about that. Might want to take a moment to just like pause, because that's a lot of stuff. I may even break these up in different videos. And this is why I'm doing the class. The class is like, this is a lot of stuff. And it's not rocket science. It's just like a continuity of these concepts, because these are really, truth is self-evident. Like the real effort is the letting down, the dropping, the indoctrination of how our inner world is wiring. That's the continuity of like thinking about natural astrology and going back to it. And hearing someone talking about it is because it's a reminder. It's a reminder of like, okay, this is what this is about. Okay, now I get it. So that's what this is about. I think all of these ideas, which I just said, I've probably mentioned many times in the past, but including myself, like I write them down to re-ground myself in this reality. So now I want to go into two more things. I've talked about this before, but we're going to go and demystify. Like, this is mostly for people who know a little bit about astrology. So much of cultural astrology it mystifies what doesn't need to be mystified. Like, there's enough mystery that we don't need to mystify anything else. Like, there's enough mystery in the fact, like, what is life? How did we get here? What is here? What are we supposed to do? That's a real friggin' mystery. But they make cultural astrology this like really, really confusing mystery, and it doesn't have to be. So part of natural astrology is demystifying all of this like stuff as it relates to astrology, which is easily understood so we can get to the real mystery. So let's go ahead into that. All right. So this here is an astrological chart. These charts are so valuable in natural astrology. They're valuable in cultural astrology. So I'll give a quick story. When I began my journey within astrology, and particularly as one who people came to interpret their chart, I wouldn't use this to interpret a chart. Most astrological websites, you can see all of this data in table form or in grid form, where it would say like sun, and then it'll tell you like what sign it's in and what degree it's in and what house it's in, and then it will list all of the aspects. And that made a whole lot more sense to my like what they'd call left brain or linear brain. Like, that was how I interpret. It's probably still like, it's one of the ways I interpret information really easily. And it wasn't until later on, and I was able to go and give like really good interpretations just by reading that data. And I would not really read these charts, what we're seeing here, this astro chart, because it was easier for me to see linear. Like, I didn't see the value of it. But the truth is, I don't think I really understood what I was looking at. And eventually, like, I was able to go and I started reading the charts from this as opposed to the grid. I much prefer to look at this now as opposed to looking at a grid. But when that process began, I would look at this as a symbol which could be interpreted, but I had no friggin' idea what this is and how important it is. Like, in a natural astrology perspective. Like, this is the understanding this chart and realizing like what it's saying is really, really significant within natural astrology. And it took me a long time to be able to read this in cultural astrology. But in natural astrology, this is the simplest thing in the world. And what this is a snapshot of where all the planets are relative to the sky and Earth. And so I talked about this before. We're going to demonstrate it again, like how amazingly obvious and simple. The most important thing when looking at one of these charts is where it says this AC here, and it's not labeled here, but you see a big black triangle. Those are small triangles. We've got 4 big black triangles. These 2 black triangles never move. They're always at the 9 o'clock position and 3 o'clock, using the clock metaphor. And AC, or ascendant, is always here, and then DC, descendant, is always here. And what this is the east-west horizon. This is Earth. This is the plane of Earth. This is the sky. This is what you see, and this is stuff you can't see. Don't even worry about this. Don't worry about the stuff that's beneath the sky. Just like this is the sky, this top half. And so what we're looking at is, this is, when you see this chart, you're looking at what the heavens are at a particular time and place. And so this is Friday, November 24th, 2023 at 6:45 a.m. in Miami, Florida. This looks like hieroglyphics. It can be really intimidating to a lot of people. There's a lot of like visual noise going on, all of these lines, all of these symbols, numbers. Like, this will shut down most people's like linear brain, because there's so much information. If you don't know it, it's like, I don't even want to know this. This is too much. So this is the same as this. All right. This is the plane of Earth. This line right here. This line, though it's not shown like from triangle to triangle, this line is the plane of Earth. This is the plane of Earth. And this half circle is where the sun rises. The sun rises here, goes up to the highest point, it sets here. The moon rises here, sets here. All of the planets rise in the east. So we're facing south, which means the east is when you're left and the west is when you're right. This is assuming you're north of the equator. And this is what we're seeing. That's what this is. On the left, this is the ascendant. This is the rising, and this is where it sets. These are where all the planets are at a given time. This is a time date stamp. So let me show you how friggin' accurate this is. So right here is a website. It's NOAA. So I think that's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric something or other. It's government. Let's see. I'll blow this up. This might be able to tell us. Department of Commerce, United States of America, the National Oceanic and Atmosphere Administration. That's what it is. Earth System Research Lab. This is their website. And like this website looks like it's from 1998, which I love. And what it will do is it doesn't have all of the cities, but you can pick from this drop down box. You pick a city and then you pick a date and it will tell you, like this is government, like Earth Lab. They will tell you when sunrise happens, when sunset happens, and solar noon, okay, for a place and a date. So what we see here is we've got November 24th, 2023. November 24th, 2023. And we're going to begin by looking at the appearance sunrise. So the sunrise appears to be, so that means from our view, from a location, so from the view of Miami, Florida, on the date of the 24th of November at 6:45, sun rises. So let's go look right here. This is an astro chart. This is totally unrelated to this, right? November 24th, 2023, Miami, 6:45 a.m. This circle, this orange circle with the dot, that's the symbol of the sun. Where is the sun? It's at 1 degree. You could follow this line right here. Let me make this larger so it's even clearer to everyone. 1 degree Sagittarius. The signs don't matter. Don't worry about that. What we're interested in is the fact that that's 1 degree and the ascendant is 1 degree. And what we see is quite literally that the sun is on the eastern horizon. What do we see right here? We see that sunrise is 6:45 a.m. We're defining sunrise as when the sun rises above the horizon. This is the horizon. This is the exact same time, 6:45 a.m., and we see the sun is at the horizon. This is how literal this is. When you look at this, this is not like, woo-woo interpretation. This is a map. This is like, okay, this is where the sun is. Okay, at 6:45, I can see the sun is rising right here. And let's continue. Let's continue going down this. So the second thing, it says solar noon. So what solar noon is this. You've got the sun, it rises, it gets to a point in the sky where it doesn't rise anymore, and then it starts to set. So it gets to a high point in the sky. And this is what high noon means. Like we now think of noon as 12 p.m. And in theory, 12 p.m. could correspond with where the sun is at the highest point, but there are a whole bunch of variables. It's definitely close. It's definitely close to where the sun is, but literally what high noon is when the sun is at the highest point. When the moon rises, rises at a highest point and begins to set. From an astrological concept, this is called the midheaven. The midheaven is the apex of whatever rises. So like high sun or high noon or the peak of the moon. It's like when something reaches the highest point, and then it starts to come down. So when we see here, we see solar noon. We're seeing solar noon right here. This is referring to when the sun is at the highest point in the sky, which is also from an astrological perspective, it's called the midheaven. They're one and the same. These are all the same things. And here we see solar noon on the 24th is at 12:07. You know, right around noon. It's pretty close. Here's the 24th. Look, it's 12:07. And look right here. Let's go expand this. We could see how incredibly accurate this is. This MC is the midheaven. Don't ask me why it's C instead of H. Sometimes they do H. It's Latin, actually. But 2 degrees and Sagittarius, and 2 degrees is the sun. Interestingly, if you were paying attention, it was at 1 degree at 6:45 a.m. Sagittarius, 1 degree and 55 seconds. Here we see it's at 2 degrees and 9 seconds. What that means is and then look at the relationship. The sun is right next to Mars. Here, Mars is at 0 degrees, 12 minutes at 12:07. And here we see Mars is at 0 degrees, 3 seconds. So there are two things that are happening. Like everything's moving across the sky. If you're sitting right here watching the sky, it all moves across. Well, very quickly, you know, in a day, like the sun rises, the sun sets. But then the sun is also moving, and that's a clockwise movement. The sun is also moving ever so slowly counterclockwise, which is why this is 1 degree, 55 seconds at 6:45 in the morning. And then 6 hours later, less than 6 hours later, it's moved a little bit. But that's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm sorry I went down that tangent. What I'm trying to make is like, this is how accurate this chart is. This says like at 12:07, we see that the sun is exactly at the midheaven, which is exactly what the NOAA website is saying, that solar noon is at 12:07. It's at the same time. What we're looking at here is an immensely accurate description of the sky. When we begin to look at these charts and understand that it's not woo, that it's not hieroglyphics, but it's an easy chart. What is this telling me? This is like the sun and the sun and Mars are at the same place. This is where I would find Mercury. Like, I don't need a star finder app on my phone. I can look at this and I can orient myself. Where do I orient myself? I make certain that I'm looking south and I got east on my left, and I can have a sense where everything is. Why am I doing this? To get my bearings. Why am I getting my bearings? So I know how to line up so life can carry me from place to place. Like, that's what we're doing. That's our practice of natural astrology. All right, so here's the last one. So we see the appearance sunset, 5:30 p.m. So what do we have here? 5:30 p.m. Let's go and expand upon this. As you can imagine now, what are we going to see? We see that the sun is exactly right here on the descendant. The descendant is where sunset occurs. It is 5:30 p.m. It is 5:30 p.m. and the sun is exactly where it should be, according to like this astronomical scientific agency that measures all of this stuff. So what is the takeaway? Why am I showing this? Like, part of the natural astrology practice is is the demystification. Like, when you go and you look at this, now I know where I am. This is a meaningful map to me. I understand at a particular date, like, where everything is. I can look at this at the date from when I'm born, where someone else is born, at the given time of, when I'm looking, the current time, like all of this, when we become more grounded in our understanding of actual reality, as opposed to grounded as an interpretation of reality, we begin to move our consciousness outside of the limitation of paradigm. And paradigm does that. The limitation is a byproduct of indoctrination. This is the same thing as, like, there's no such thing as Monday, or the same thing as when you tell me the first of the month does not line up with the new moon. Well, then I know that you're telling me an abstract concept. We are grounding our understanding in our actual environment so that we are no longer swept up in these stories that we're taught, and are becoming free to watch or to experience life outside of paradigm. So, all right, where am I? 49 minutes. I said I was going to talk a little bit about the age of Aquarius. So let me just do that right now. Or the precession of the equinoxes. So the precession of the equinoxes, that's where when you hear about the age of Aquarius. At the end of the day, the precession of the equinoxes is making reference to a 25,000 year cycle, which at least in my opinion, is at least theoretically that's just a concept. We can't really imagine 25,000 years. But anyway, so there's a 25,000 year cycle, and that cycle can be broken down into different 2,100 year, roughly, ages, and each one of those ages corresponds to a sign. And so when you hear the age of Aquarius, they're talking about the precession of the equinoxes, and they're talking about this concept. But it's also very kind of like woo, and it's very like, people don't quite understand what it is. They've heard the age of Aquarius, and the age of Aquarius is like, you know it from the song, you know it from the final scene in the 40-Year-Old Virgin. It is a concept, perhaps as the golden age of humanity. But ultimately, it's a bunch of like more cultural astrology, like contradictions and woo. So let's break this down for a little bit. I've mentioned in the past about how signs don't matter, or they don't matter as much. The reason I say that is because the signs are, they're relative. They're relative to the system you use. The sign, a sign will change. A planet will change signs it's in, depending upon whether you follow sidereal or tropical or 12 sign or 13 sign or 14 sign astrology. Like, there is the potential to change, but the truth is, like, the planet's in the same place it always was. So how could the sign change? The sign can change because the signs are not true. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to change. What is true if you were born at sunrise, like what we just saw right now? Like, where is it? This is sunrise. The sun is sunrise. It doesn't matter what system you use. The sun is always at sunrise. That is a fundamental fact. This is tropical. Tropical defines this as being 1 degree Sagittarius. If we were following sidereal, this would say it was 4 degrees Scorpio. But the truth of the matter is the sun is at sunrise. The signs are flexible. So, okay. So within Western astrology, which is what most people in the West, who the majority of people who listen, I think, to these videos probably are, Western astrology is based upon this concept, or tropical astrology, excuse me. You see it says tropical right here. Tropical astrology is this concept which says that the beginning of the zodiac, and they define the zodiac at 0 degrees Aries. Aries is said to be the first sign, and 0 degrees is the first degree of the first sign, so this is where the zodiac begins. Remember, it's a friggin' circle. It's a friggin' circle. There's no beginning, there's no end. You can pick a starting point that is 100% true, but there is not a functional truth about the starting point. But you can come up with logics for it. And so the logic of tropical astrology is that where the sun is on the equinox is a real thing. And what that means is when they're in a sunrise to sunrise event, aka a day, there is the same amount of daylight as nighttime. That's what an equinox is. That is a real thing. That is true. That is real. Like I'm not saying that's not true. That is immensely true. What tropical astrology does is they align the beginning of the zodiac with the spring equinox, which is March 21st, more or less. That is like there's logic to that. Like, that makes sense. Like, the spring is a birth. Yeah, that makes sense. I can see that. This when the sun, I could see why all the different, solstices or equinoxes, why someone could at least come up with a logical story for why that's where something begins. Really doesn't matter. It's just as long as you understand the logic. So spring equinox as the beginning of the zodiac, that makes sense. In the beginning of the zodiac at the first 0 degrees of the first sign, okay, like, I understand that. And that is what tropical astrology is. It says that the beginning of the zodiac is 0 degrees Aries, and that is always on March 21st. And that doesn't change. Changes a little bit. So here we see right here, this is March 22nd. Maybe it's 1923. It has the sun at 0 degrees Aries. That's where it begins. And here we go forward 72 years. The reason I went forward 72 years is they say, like, that the precession of the equinox moves 1 degree every 72 years. And here it shows that it moved forward. Let's just say it's the same, though. So we have it the same. So the idea is that it doesn't matter where the sun actually is. We are in tropical zodiac. The beginning of the zodiac is always corresponds to the spring equinox, which is March 21st. All right, now we're going to go to sidereal. You see how this says tropical. Tropical and Western are see, it says standard Western. They're often, interchangeable. Now we're going to sidereal. Sidereal can be applied. This is where it gets so confusing. Again, the fact that it's this confusing, it is meant so that no one really understands what's going on. Or maybe it's not meant to, but that's where we are right now. No one really understands. They're unable to really differentiate all of these, like, complex ideas which are overlapping. So sidereal, on the exact same day, March 22nd, 2023, it says that the sun is in Pisces. And so remember, this is called the precession of the equinoxes. This is the equinox. And the precession of the equinox says that on the equinox, where the sun is, it moves 1 degree every 72 years. And it will make a complete circle in 25,000 years. Like, that's how, if you were to go and multiply 360 degrees times 72, that's the cycle of the precession of the equinoxes. And what we see is in sidereal, it takes in consideration where the precession of the equinox, and so every 72 years, the sun's placement on the equinox is moved 1 degree. And so what we could see in 1923, we see that it is in Pisces. And so when they talk about the age of Aquarius, what it ultimately means is that on March 22nd, or on the spring equinox, it should say Aquarius. We are on the 23rd. We see it was at 6 degrees. This is so weird. So this is a different type of sidereal. You got these different sidereals, and this one is actually moving forward. It should be moving backwards because this is 100 or 72 years later. This should be at probably 5 degrees Pisces, because once this gets to Aquarius is when theoretically we're in the age of Aquarius, which, do the math, 72 times 5 years, assuming that's 5 years, would be, 72 times 5 is another 350 odd years from now. But then you ask the question, well, what am I seeing in the sky? Sidereal is close to what you're seeing in the sky, but it's not exactly the same. People who follow real sky astrology will look at, like, the actual size of the constellations and not divide them up like in equal 30-degree segments. Like, there are all of these different ways of interpreting these ideas of signs. At the end of the day, they're all in contradiction with one another. They're all in contradiction. And this idea of like, we're stepping into the age of Aquarius, and again, like, well, what does that even mean? Like, if you want to go and place like value into the archetype of Aquarius, there's multiple different interpretations. And our reality, the paradigm reality, is matching on a certain level the age of Aquarius. And they're selling us that we're moving in the age of Aquarius. But there's no age of Aquarius which is happening right now. And no system is telling us that's the age of Aquarius. So by calling this the age of Aquarius is like no different than saying the first of the month is, what day is today? Today is December 3rd. So 2 days ago, they're saying, okay, now we're in a new month, December 1st. Well, we're not anywhere near, we're probably 10 days away from the new moon. They're not in alignment. The month is a made-up thing, and because it's a made-up thing and they sold it to us like it has value, the same thing is true with this whole idea of the age of Aquarius. Even if there is an age of an Aquarius, and that's another conversation altogether, it's not happening now. We're being sold that. We're being sold a really like ugly version of the age of Aquarius. So again, like, what is the purpose? Why am I sharing this with you? Is to demystify a lot of this cultural astrology stuff so that we can then get down to the real mystery, so that we can really ground ourselves in understanding the heavens and their movements and orient ourselves to the rhythms which are knowable, so then we can surrender into the mystery. That's what natural astrology is all about. So my friends, I appreciate your attention. As I said, if you're interested in this first round of natural astrology sessions, I've got a couple spaces left. Hit me up right away. I'm going to kick that off on December 12th, so I can get you involved with that. Going forward, I'm going to start doing open classes on the quarter moons going forward. So that might be something to look forward to. And every time that happens, I'm going to be talking about a different concept. And it'll be an opportunity to have like a real-time conversation, question answering, so forth. So that should be happening, hopefully, probably by February. I'm going to be doing that in that time period, or that would probably be, what is that? I want to start getting in the habit of stop calling it February. So the February time frame would be the wolf or the snow moon is what it'll be known, but I'll use February just because most people wouldn't know what I mean by that. In the meantime, could really use any support from any of you folks, like order yourself a service, drop me off like, a little birthday gift. Mike Wan here could definitely appreciate that. And I'm going to continue with this life which I have been born into, and surrendering into where life is bringing me. So I do want to end with this. So here's my notebook. One of the things I do in my notebooks is, this one really begins on the 12th of December, but I write in here all sorts of things. This is the front cover, and I use this as just different things to bring back my consciousness to as, life carries me. One of the things I haven't talked about today, but I've talked about many times, is this idea of arrow circulation and the arrow. And so here's a quote I found, and I wrote it on the front page of my book. This is the third time I've written it, and this is for me to, for myself, which helps me ground into what my more or less purpose is, or what I'm doing, my mission right now. And I just want to be clear with you guys. This is how I'm seeing it from my perspective. So here's the quote. By definition, a new era cannot grow out of the dichotomies and structures of the past. The future must be created afresh by those who are able to journey into the undifferentiated ground that underlies being, and to bring back a new dispensation from the gods and ancestors. This is the task of skywalkers who visit heaven and the underworld and then become arrow circulators who cast a sacred circle round a land and consecrate it a new destiny. And so with that, my friends, this is Mike Kwan, Skywalker, and you wouldn't be here unless you were part of the same. So thank you for your attention, thank you for your time, and until the next time, sayonara.